It is feudal Japan, sometime in the 1500s. The mountains are cold, the sky is ink black, and somewhere deep in the forested hills of Kyoto, a Buddhist monk is walking through a field of potato plants. He carries a small lantern. His breath fogs in the night air. He moves slowly, not because he is tired, but because he is listening. He kneels down, presses 2 fingers into the dark soil, holds them there for a moment. Then he looks up at the sky, a sky with no moon, no glow, nothing but stars, and he nods to himself. Tonight is the night. He turns back toward the monastery and calls out quietly to the others. Within minutes, a line of monks files into the field. No torches, no rush, just lanterns, wooden tools, and 500 years of knowledge moving through their hands like muscle memory. They had been waiting 29 days for this exact night, not because of superstition, not because of ritual, but because somewhere in the long, unwritten history of their order, a monk far wiser than the rest figured something out. Something about the moon, something about the soil, something about the potato that modern science is only now beginning to catch up to. Here is the question that should stop you cold. What did these monks know, with no laboratories, no satellites, no soil sensors, that made their potatoes last longer, taste richer, and resist rot in ways that would make a modern farmer's jaw drop? And what does it mean for the potatoes sitting in your kitchen right now? Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will never look at a full moon the same way again. Most people think of Japanese monks and they picture incense, silence, meditation. What they don't picture is dirt under fingernails. But here's the truth. The great Buddhist monasteries of feudal Japan were not just spiritual centers. They were some of the most sophisticated, self-sufficient food systems the ancient world had ever seen. These monks did not go to markets. They did not rely on merchants or trade routes. Everything they ate, every grain of rice, every root vegetable, every fermented preserve that carried them through the brutal mountain winters came from the land they tended with their own hands. And in that land, the potato was everything. It was not glamorous, it was not ceremonial, but it was the crop that stood between a monastery of 50 men and starvation when the snow buried the hills for 4 straight months. They called it their silent protector, the crop that asked for little and gave back everything. So they learned to treat it with extraordinary respect. Over generations, the monks developed a system of growing and harvesting that was so precise, so carefully observed, that it looked almost religious from the outside. New initiates who joined the monastery were not taught these practices in any book. They learned by watching, by following the elder monks into the field season after season, until the knowledge passed into them not as information, but as instinct. And the most sacred rule of all, the one that every monk from Hokkaido to Kyushu seemed to know without question, was this: you do not harvest the potatoes unless the moon is dark. No exceptions, not if you were tired, not if the weather was turning, not if the harvest had already been delayed. You waited for the new moon, you watched the sky, and when that moonless night arrived, cool, still, and black as charcoal, you went into the field. For 500 years, nobody wrote down why. It was simply the way. The kind of knowledge that lives in the hands and habits of a culture long before anyone thinks to explain it. But the explanation exists, and it is hiding inside the science of the earth itself. You already know the moon moves the ocean. Every tide on every coastline on this planet answers to the moon's gravitational pull like a dog on a leash. That is not poetry, that is physics. But here is what most people have never considered. If the moon is powerful enough to move billions of tons of ocean water, what is it doing to the water inside the soil beneath your feet? The answer is more dramatic than you might expect.
Researchers in biodynamic agriculture, a field that has been quietly producing some of the most fascinating agricultural science of the last century, have spent decades mapping how lunar cycles affect soil moisture levels. What they found confirms what those Japanese monks appeared to understand intuitively. During a full moon, the gravitational pull draws moisture upward through the soil toward the surface. The ground becomes wetter near the top. Plant cells swell. Root vegetables sitting in that soil absorb more water into their skins. They become heavier, softer, and critically far more vulnerable to bruising during harvest and to fungal rot during storage. During a new moon, the opposite happens. The gravitational pull eases. Moisture retreats deeper into the earth. The topsoil becomes drier, firmer, and more compact. Root vegetables like potatoes sit in a lower moisture environment. Their skins are drier. Their cellular walls are under less internal pressure. This is the moment the monks were waiting for. When you pull a potato from dry, firm soil on a moonless night, you are pulling a potato that has naturally reduced its surface moisture. Its skin is tighter, less damaged during digging, less exposed to the bacteria and fungi in the air and soil that cause rot to take hold. The ancient Japanese had a concept for this cycle. They called it tsuchi no ki, loosely translated as the living breath of the earth. They understood, in their own language, that the soil was not a dead medium. It was a living system that expanded and contracted, that had seasons within seasons, rhythms within rhythms. They may not have called it gravity, they may not have drawn diagrams of tidal forces, but they watched their potatoes closely enough, season after season, century after century, to know exactly when the earth was breathing in and when the earth was breathing out, and they only harvested on the exhale. Let's go deeper, literally. Inside every potato you have ever held, there is a quiet biological war happening between two forces, moisture and starch. The balance between these two things determines almost everything: how long it lasts, how it tastes, how thick its skin grows, whether it becomes food for your family or food for the mold on your pantry floor. A potato harvested with high internal moisture is a fragile thing. Its cells are swelled and tightly pressurized. When you dig it out of the ground, when the shovel catches it at an angle, when it rolls against another potato, when it drops into a harvest basket, those pressurized cells bruise easily. Beneath the surface, invisible to the eye, the tissue darkens and begins to break down. Fungi find those bruises like a map. Rot follows within days. A potato harvested with lower internal moisture is a completely different creature. Its cells are less pressurized, more compact. When it takes a knock during harvest, it absorbs the impact rather than breaking down. Its skin, the potato's only armor against the outside world, cures faster and tighter because it is not waterlogged. The starch-to-water ratio is higher, which means it is denser, more flavorful, and dramatically more resistant to the organisms that cause spoilage.
This is exactly what you get when you harvest on a new moon.
The monks did not have microscopes. They could not see inside the cells of their potatoes, but they could taste the difference. They could see the difference on their storage room floors, where new moon harvested potatoes sat in wooden crates through December, January, and February without a single soft spot, while potatoes pulled at the wrong time turned to black mush before the first frost had fully set. They also understood something else that modern food scientists now call curing. When a potato is freshly harvested, its skin is thin and vulnerable, but if you allow it to rest in dry, dark, cool conditions for 1 to 2 weeks after harvest, the skin thickens, wounds seal. The potato essentially heals itself and builds a protective shell that dramatically extends its storage life. New moon harvesting gave the monks a head start on this process that full moon harvesting simply could not. They were not just choosing the right night, they were setting their potatoes up for the best possible future. 500 years ago, with nothing but patience, observation, and the willingness to wait for a dark sky. Now we bring it home. You do not live in a feudal monastery. You probably do not have 50 monks and a root cellar carved into a mountainside, but you have a garden or a patch of soil or even a few containers on a balcony, and everything those monks understood applies to you just as much as it applied to them. Here is how you use this knowledge today. First, track the lunar cycle. There are dozens of free apps that show you the moon phase calendar for your exact location. Find your next new moon, mark it, plan your potato harvest within the 2 to 3 day window around that date when the moon is at the darkest and soil moisture near the surface is at its lowest. Second, check your soil before you dig. Push your finger 2 inches into the soil near your potato plants. It should feel dry and crumbly, not damp, not sticky. If it's still holding moisture, wait another day. The monks would have waited, so should you. Third, cure your potatoes properly after harvest. Lay them in a single layer in a dark, dry space with good airflow, a shed, a garage, a covered porch. Keep the temperature between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. Leave them there for 10 to 14 days before storing or eating. During this time, the skin thickens, and any small wounds from digging will seal completely. This single step alone can double or even triple your storage time. Fourth, learn the 3 mistakes that destroy potatoes in storage. Washing them before storing. This removes the natural protective coating and introduces moisture. Storing them near onions. The gases they exchange accelerate sprouting and decay on both sides. And storing them in plastic bags. Potatoes need to breathe, and sealed plastic traps the moisture that will eventually rot them from the inside out. The monks knew none of these things as bullet points in a video. They knew them as lived truth, embedded in daily practice, passed from elder to initiate, refined over lifetimes, until even the newest monk in the field knew exactly what to do without needing to be told. We have traded that depth of knowledge for convenience, for supermarkets and plastic packaging, and produce that travels 1,000 kilometers before it reaches our kitchens. And somewhere in that trade, we lost the understanding that a potato, a simple, humble, extraordinary thing, has its own biology, its own rhythms, its own relationship with the earth and the sky above it. The monk with the lantern knew that. He walked into a dark field on a moonless night, not out of superstition, but out of 500 years of paying close attention, of watching, of waiting, of respecting the quiet intelligence of the natural world. You have that same intelligence available to you. All it costs is a little patience and a glance at the sky. The monks didn't have YouTube, but they had something far more powerful. 500 years of getting it right. Now, so do you. On Garden Wisdom, we're bringing ancient knowledge back to the modern garden, one hack at a time. If you're ready to stop being a consumer and start being a producer, make sure to like this video and subscribe. We have a massive series on high-profit herbs and traditional pest control coming next, and you won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and remember, wisdom isn't just what you know, it's what you plant. See you in the next one.